Charlie Tolhurst show today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is the Charlie Tolhurst show live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I do apologise that my camera isn't working once again, so I'm having to default to using this today. But I'm joined by Labour Party supporter Zach Chambers this week to round up all the latest news. Hello, Zach.
Hi, Charlie. Hello, mate. Ugh.
So we've moved this. The reason we have moved the podcast from yesterday to today is because tomorrow England will be playing the Euro 2020 final against Italy, and it's our biggest match 54 years. We'll come more on to that later. We're going to start with the digest now. We're going to get over some of the biggest news stories of the week, and I want to start, Zach, with Freedom Day whilst we're here. Now, the 19th of July is the date that the UK government aimed to lift all COVID-19 restrictions. And Zach, what do you make about the announcement from the Prime Minister on Monday of this week?
Yeah, hi, Charlie. It's good to be back again. So it's all inevitable now, isn't it? We're going to get the announcement Monday, presumably, about this opening up. Not this week, but next week. We're going to get an announcement Monday, but it's going to be in act the 19th. So it's all a bit of a kapow opening, Charlie, isn't it now? Where they're all going to be opening up. It's going to feel like we're back to normal again in less than just over 9 days, Charlie. We'll be back to normal. It's quite something. But the usual excuses is that the virus, we've got to live with the virus and all that. And that the vaccine is obviously effective all against it. It all feels like there's been a different approach in the last few weeks, Charlie, that's resulted in this big bang of reopening. No face masks anymore, no social distancing, QR codes scrapped in pubs, bars and restaurants, 100% capacity. It really does feel like the big normal again. In some ways, you could say we're reclaiming our lives, Charlie. In some ways, in some areas as well, some people are going to be a little bit anxious, and it's understandable, really, to be fair. But yeah, no face masks anymore, including on buses, public transports. Not exactly popular with the public, I have to say. The idea of removing everything, I think it's like 70% something. Chance, calm down. Sorry, my dog's a little bit it's upset or anything, but it is the big bang in about 9 days' time now, Charlie. And it comes with some risks as well. Let's just say that. I mean, there's Sajid Javid's, obviously the new health secretary, has said that once we get past 19th, there could be up to 100,000 cases per day, which is what like we've never had before. I mean, remember when we had the Kent variant, Charlie, I think we got about 70, 80,000 a day at peak. I don't think we ever got to 100,000. So 100,000 cases and a full reopening is going to be quite something. But it sounds like the government is saying this is a risk worth taking now, because their excuse is, well, if we lock down during September and stuff like that, well, not lock down, but if we put restrictions on now, then we all miss the summer holidays. If we put it in December, then there'll be a bigger peak and everything like that, and that will overrun the hospitals. It's understandable, but it is a risk anyway, I think, Charlie. I think it is a big risk.
I know, Zach. I have to say, on the digest today, I wasn't particularly impressed with what Keir Starmer had to say the other day on the restrictions. I know he called Boris Johnson's plan reckless by removing all your social restrictions. To be honest with you, I understand about the masks. I do think in some areas there'll be discretion for wearing face coverings, for example, on public transport. I think some operators might want to encourage discretion to say, look, you're in a closed space, but you need to wear a mask. But in some other areas, the hospitality sector is absolutely dying out right now. They need people. If you want to, honestly, what I miss is ordering at the bar. People go up to the bar, order. That's what's missing from the.
I agree. Thing. Yeah, no, I agree. I think here's the thing, though, Charlie, is that as you said on like the face coverings, like, you know, on public transport, the Mayor of London could technically, under because he runs Transport for London, TfL, he could technically, because it's the way it works in his sector, he could technically enforce the mask rule if he wanted to. It's all up to the train operators apparently, and they could have the power. You know, he could have the powers to enforce masks, which is very interesting. Some train companies may not be able to do it, like because of they don't have the powers to. But it's interesting, nevertheless, Charlie, that, you know, we could have a situation where, you know, the government says masks are recommended but not mandatory, whereas TfL, for example, the Sadiq Khan could say we can enforce masks on public transport. I have to say, Charlie, I don't think the public will disagree with me on that one. I mean, there's a YouGov poll that said a couple of moments ago, I think it was like 60-70% said they'd rather keep a mandatory face mask for public transport, which I can understand, really, to be fair, and everything like that. If you're in enclosed space and everything, you've got people breathing into you, coughing into you, and there's a virus about. It's not particularly pleasant, and it does particularly scare people. I know some people will just want to wear masks potentially indefinitely, which is, in an age of COVID and everything like that, understandable. But I can see why the public would want to wear masks and transport stuff, and I can see the situation where, you know, the Mayor of London wants to, and, you know, enforce it.
Certainly, Zach. I'm now going to play for you Boris Johnson's announcement the other day on plans to step 4 on the 19th, which was announced last Monday during a Downing Street press conference. Have a listen to this.
When we paused step 4 a few weeks ago, we had 2 reasons. First, we wanted to get more jabs into people's arms, and we have, with over 45 million adults now having received a first dose and 33 million a second. That is a higher proportion of the adult population of any European country except Malta. And our expectation remains that by July 19th, every adult will have had the chance to receive a first dose, and 2/3 will have received their second dose. And the second reason we paused was because we wanted a bit more time to see the evidence that our vaccines have helped to break the link between disease and death. And as the days have gone by, it has grown ever clearer that these vaccines are indeed successful, with the majority of those admitted to hospital unvaccinated. And Chris and Patrick will show the data highlighting the greatly reduced mortality that the vaccines have achieved. So as we come to the 4th step, we have to balance the risks. The risks of the disease, which the vaccines have reduced, but very far from eliminated, and the risks of continuing with legally enforced restrictions that inevitably take their toll on people's lives and livelihoods, on people's health and mental health. And we must be honest with ourselves that if we can't reopen our society in the next few weeks, when we will be helped by the arrival of summer and by the school holidays, then we must ask ourselves, when will we be able to return to normal?
Thank you, Boris Johnson, there for that announcement on the restrictions. There was a press conference the other day that was where that video was taken. But we're going to move on now, Zach, from Freedom Day. Despite the rise in the Delta variant, I will come on to football now because, Zach, thousands of fans packed at Wembley for England's huge win the other day against Denmark. What do you make of this?
Whoa. Oh, Charlie, we're finally getting some positive news in our life. You know what? If you want my honest opinion, it's coming home. Yes, that's what I honestly think. Yeah, that was an incredible game. You cannot deny that. You know, whilst winning, we're not normally good at getting past semi-finals. And the last time we did get to a final, I think it was 66. We remember that. And, well, the rest is history. I mean, we've not managed to get past the semis in 96. We remember Gareth Southgate missing the penalty. To think he's our manager today and sending us to pass to a final, won it in extra time, is quite extraordinary. It is extraordinary, Charlie, I think. And it's just such a delight, because in pretty divided times, there is something there to get our spirits going. And the England football team is one of them. The manager is another. The whole players, the whole community. The royal family sent out a message today wishing England well against Italy tomorrow. But the Denmark game, that was something. We obviously conceded just before the end of the first half. And then we got one back. And then, there was a few questionable VAR decisions and penalties. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, we won it, Charlie. And we're now going to be facing Italy tomorrow in less than 24 hours' time. Italy are a very tough team, Charlie. Italy I have to say, I think they're the favourites for the match. They've been so strong throughout, Charlie. They've been so strong. And they've been impressive whenever they've got the trade like Jorginho, very, very strong, a Chelsea player. But overall, just so much depth and talent in him. It's going to be difficult, I think. But I think there is a spirit to be had. And I think it's coming home.
Zach, what's your message to all of the England fans planning on attending the match tomorrow, despite fears of the Delta variant of COVID?
Well, I think COVID's gone out the window for a day. I think so. Those who are attending can obviously enjoy. It's going to be at 75% capacity. So 60,000 fans. So it's going to be packed like it was in the semi-final. But my goodness, I think these fans could be witnessing some history here. It's been, 55 years since we won something. And now I think finally is our time. And if they win, if these players do well and they win us the cup, it's like Gareth Southgate's probably going to be knighted. The players will probably get knighted. It'll go down in history books, Charlie, if this happens. And I hope it does. Because, oh my goodness, Great Britain's going to be roaring if we win on Sunday night.
Yeah, I really want to say, guys, please stay safe out there. And also, if you're going, make sure that you potentially get tested or attend if you've got a vaccination as well. I want to touch on that in a little bit, actually, Zach. Vaccine passports in my next part of the show. Vaccine passports certainly creating a two-tier society in Britain as we speak at the moment, Zach, because I've just read up and heard some interesting sources from Whitehall saying that vaccine passports may have to be reinstated in the autumn if there was another COVID wave for hospitality businesses such as bars, pubs and restaurants. What do you make of this scheme that the government is planning on introducing?
Well, it's been a bit on and off, this COVID vaccine passport thing. It's been very, very on and off. It's being used currently, as from the NHS Act for holidays and everything like that, and understandably so, because some countries like the EU, Canada, and all want to recognise, fully vaccinated Britons coming in. And there's been some good news on that front this week. Obviously, with no longer the requirement for amber list countries to, for fully vaccinated to quarantine there. That's some good news there. In other news, what was I going to say? Yeah, on the vaccine passport thing, it's interesting that it's come up again, Charlie, because it's been very confusing messaging. 1 week they're going to happen. They're re-exploring this. The next week it's going to be scrapped. It's not going to happen. And now we're talking about it for a potential wave in the winter, which is interesting and a bit not very consistent, I have to say, Charlie. It's not very consistent at all. I have to say it's it's a bit hypocritical really to come up with this vaccine passport system 1 minute and then think, oh, we're going to scrap it next, and then suddenly it's all come up again. So that's what I think. If you're going to do it, but stop messing around. Obviously there's some would this break equality rules? Would it mean that one group is marginalised another? Yes, potentially. I think this is the only way, Charlie, I think, if this is going to happen, to really open up keep businesses open during the winter, because they don't want businesses being shut down and getting forced by restrictions. So it's either two things, Charlie. You either restrict in the in the winter, and then you have businesses complaining, or you have to have these passports, which affects a number of people really. And so it's really going to be a win. If this really happens, Charlie, it's going to be a lose-lose situation for businesses either way. And I can understand why they're trying to look ahead and everything. But yeah, I think that's a little bit of a problem, really.
Crazy, Zach. I mean, I'm heavily against vaccine passports, to be honest. I just don't understand that they're trying to create discrimination on businesses like hospitality to say, and for example as well, some people, like, will they offer the vaccine to everyone? That's the question, looking at the figures at the moment. You're just like, are you planning on having, right, you're going to have a negative test for COVID-19. Oh, will businesses have to check through people's ID if they've had vaccination doses of the vaccine? It just creates, as I mentioned earlier, a two-tier society. I think
I get that.
It's very confusing, isn't it?
I get that. Yeah, I think it's confusing, and there seems to be some inconsistent messaging going around saying whether what's happening this, because the 1 minute's on, the next minute's off, and then it's very inconsistent messaging, Charlie. But as I said, it's a bit of a lose-lose situation. If you do introduce them in the winter, then you face with discrimination in some types of people. The question is, who would you exempt potentially? Kids, actually, because they're not all of them are going to be vaccinated for, like, going to hospital, like a restaurant, for example. But who would you exempt people? Would you, if you're going to not do COVID passports, but you have faced the risk of restrictions because the case numbers are rising and there's the mixing of COVID and flu, what happens then? Do you then take all your staff off, potentially? Because obviously, if we're going to have 100,000 cases per day, Charlie, with opening up, how many are going to be pinged by test and trace, for example? And, so you're going to risk the staff not being in, or you're going to risk creating a two-tier system. And I can understand why you would want a COVID passport to get in, so that prove you're safe and everything. I can understand why there's also discrimination side. Yeah, it's a lose-lose, Charlie, if this happens. It really is, whatever way you do it, really, I think.
I mean, Zach, I think as well, like, on the subject of the 100,000 cases a day, again, it's just another estimate that the government make and SAGE have been making.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, when I did hear that the other day, I was like, it's again a very bit of a scaremongering prediction. But I have to say as well, I think on the subject of, like, I mean, obviously this is a political issue, the vaccine passports, and I think there's got to be a debate on this. Once Parliament is back from recess over the summer, they seriously need to consider a debate on this, because I have to say, I mean, I don't know what MPs are going to be like on there having their views on this. It's going to be very, very interesting indeed. So we're going to move on now from the digest to sports round now. This is the next part of the show where I'm going to be talking about news. We've already covered the Euros now, so I won't be doing that. But Zach, I want to cover Wimbledon very quickly because there's been a final result today for Ashley Barty, who won the women's final. Any words for her?
Oh, well, it's Wimbledon, Charlie. It's very interesting because Ashley Barty is, I think, the first Australian woman to to win Wimbledon, I believe, as
Yeah.
well. 41 years. I've just read this up. I mean, I don't really watch women's tennis so much. I probably watch the men's. Don't ask why, but but nevertheless, it was a 6-3, 6-7, 4-7, 6-3 overall. But it was at full capacity as well, by the way, from what I've read. So yeah, I haven't really seen much of Wimbledon this week, but I've obviously read about it. I have to say it must be really impressive for, an Australian woman, for the first time in 50 years to win it. I haven't seen Ashley Barty. I'm not sure she's won much major titles, really, to be fair. I don't know where she is in the world or something like that. She's ranked number 1 in the WTA. Okay, so she's probably won several titles. But this is the first time Australians won Wimbledon from what I've seen. So yeah, good on her.
Yeah, so men's final tomorrow. Novak Djokovic will be playing in that as well. I'm not sure the opponent, but Novak Djokovic is in the men's final.
Yeah.
That will be on centre court tomorrow before the big kick-off in Wembley Stadium for the England v Italy match. But I want to say, Zach, moving on from the tennis now to the Olympics. 2 weeks to go, just under 2 weeks now till the Olympic Games start in Japan. And unfortunately, it's going to be the strangest Olympics ever. And unfortunately, no spectators, even in Japan, won't be allowed to attend the Games.
Yeah. And that's the reason for that, Charlie. Is there's been a state emergency declared again in Tokyo because of the rising case rates. And obviously, they don't have as much vaccines, faster rollout as like, in the UK. So the Olympic International Committee, IOC, Japan originally planned for them to be a limited amount of spectators, not a full capacity, but a limited amount. But because of the regulations of the state of emergency laws, they're going to have 0 crowds instead. I have to say though, I'm pleased to see the Olympics is still going ahead though, Charlie. That's the main thing. Although I have to say it's not universally popular, I believe, in Japan. The Olympics going ahead there, they're more on the safer side of things in Japan, and it's not exactly a popular decision there.
Nah, and I'm sure I understand why they've done it, and I think as well for athletes, it's going to be a very different experience this year with the opening and closing ceremony. So that is the Olympics. Paralympic Games due to be made next week, and whether that will be going ahead in Tokyo as well, planned for next month. But Zach, moving on from that now, from the sports round, I'll do the NASCAR action whilst we're here. Tomorrow, I believe there's another NASCAR race that is on. Actually, we're going to Atlanta for the Quacker State.
Atlanta,
400.
second time this season.
What do you make of this event?
Second time this season, I think, going to Atlanta as well. I think I just want to mention this, Charlie, that Truck Series on dirt, I think on Friday at Knoxville the first time as well. And I think it was Austin Hill that won that race. The Xfinity race is on now, I believe. And then tomorrow, I believe, the Cup Series race. Let me check the lineup because I do have the lineup here. Actually,
Chase Elliott won last weekend, just to confirm, in the maiden at the Road America.
And I believe he's on pole as well for tomorrow, alongside Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, Truex, Larson, Reddick, Busch, Ross Chastain, Logano. That's the top 10 starting tomorrow, and that'll be 8:30. I think it's 8:30 UK time, I believe. Yeah, that's correct. So that'll be tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the Quacker State 400% by Walmart, that event as well. And that's in Atlanta. It's going to be interesting, that one. Big NASCAR event. Chase Elliott winning last time out of Road America. But, Zach, just to finish off the sports round segment, Formula One back next weekend for the British Grand Prix. Very, very exciting news with full capacity crowd at Silverstone. And, Zach, this event is going to be a big event for Formula One this year, isn't it?
Yes, Charlie. I mean, goodness me, full capacity. It's going to be the biggest UK sports event, I believe, under COVID restrictions. Really, well, there's only 2 days of it. Really, there will be 1 day left of it. Very interesting. So, and there's also the, I believe there's also, Charlie, there's the first race of sprint qualifying as well on the Saturday, which is going to be interesting to see how this all is. But, 30-minute race, determining the grid for the main race on Sunday, and then you've got qualifying on the Friday. It's going to be a lot of unknowns, I think, Charlie. See how this all works out. But nevertheless, I'm excited. F1's coming home.
I'm very excited to see Formula One try this out. Lewis Hamilton did complain the other day and said it could be like a train with the amount of cars. It's going to be interesting. So you need qualifying starting on Friday. This is going to be a big event for Formula One. This new sprint qualifying format to see in action. It will also be, I believe, at the Italian and also the Brazilian Grand Prix. This is going to feature as well. So, Zach, it's going to really spice the action up for racing, will it?
Yeah. This will be very interesting. It's obviously a trial run at the moment, Charlie, to see whether this is going to be working. They're going to consider this in the future. I have my doubts over it personally, whether this is going to be really exciting or not. But, it's worth giving it a go as a trial to see whether it's worth it in the future, or whether it's useless. Really, we'll just have to wait and see what's like.
Yes,
if you think about the field today, I'm a bit iffy about it. If we had a closer pack, then maybe it would be a little bit more excited. But you can either expect to be rather Red Bull, Mercedes dominated, but going by previous experiences. But it's all going to depend, because this is going to have an element of who starts where for Sunday's race. And there's points up for grab as well, Charlie. There's 3 points if you win, 2 points for second, obviously a point for podium. So it could be important, that part, especially in the championship. I think Max Verstappen's 31 ahead. And you don't want to go into the main race 28, because you always want a safety net if you some ways. There's lots up to stakes, I think, Charlie, especially with sprint qualifying and everything. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, so the British Grand Prix between the 16th and the 18th of July at Silverstone. Please tune in for that race. Sky Sports F1 for all the action. But of course, also the WC,
Charlie,
and Channel 4.
Channel 4's. This is the only race that Channel 4 shows live. So it's available on free to air this next week. So big audience.
And also, do not forget the W Series will also be racing at Silverstone as well. We'll keep you posted on the W Series action from next week. But we're going to move on now from sports rounds to Charlie's good news. I finally have to do a Simon McCoy now and bring you my weekly good news segment. And let's start with the good news today whilst we're here. And the first good news is that, and this is an interesting news story here, Sweats could power smartwatches and activity trackers in the future. Research into developing new technology has been announced. Wearable electronic devices are great tools for health monitoring, but it's been difficult to find convenient power source for them. Now, a group of scientists have successfully developed a tested a wearable biofuel cell array that generates electric power from a Lacazette in the wearer's watch, opening doors to electronic health monitoring by nothing more than bodily fluids. It cannot be denied over the past few decades, the number of miniaturization of electronic devices has taken new stories. Today, pocket-sized smartphones that could put an old desktop computers to shame, and a plethora of options of wireless connectivity, and there's particular type of those development and steadily advancing wearable biosensors. So overall, it is very, very interesting to see exactly this news there as well. So that's my first news story. My second one is that BBC on BBC News now, why are strawberry experts hoping to serve up an ace? Well, whether their favourite tennis player loses or win, crowds are flocking to Wimbledon tennis championships to find pleasure and consolation in the food there becoming a staple event. Strawberries and cream. Over 100,000 panettes are scoffed during Wimbledon fortnight with a staggering 700,000 litres of cream. Now, UK scientists come up with a new variety of strawberry that hope they can extend these hungry snacks in enjoyment through the summer into the autumn. This new berry technology called Mailing 6 years, lasts for 6 years. Researchers by NIAB East Main in Kent, the UK's largest horticulture research event, have been tinkering with the strawberry varieties to come up with they feel not only suits British plates, but also makes growing and harvesting easier for the producers. And finally, South Essex College have announced some news that I would like to bring you here. And this news is concerning the UK's logistics courses. South Essex College targets supply chain staff shortages with its logistical courses. Amid the current lorry driver shortage in the UK, South Essex College announced that it's looking to remedy the problem by training a large numbers of logistics professionals. The college, located over 3 main sites in Basildon, Southend-on-Sea and Grays in Essex, says it's stepping in to offer a variety of courses to aid the industry and get more drivers out on the roads delivering goods. In a statement, the college said individuals can upskill, retrain and start new careers with logistics modules that cover the following areas: traffic, office manager program, driver, CPC, LGV driver training, 5-day practical course, introduction to LGV driving, introduction to express courier, forklift truck and practical training, and ADR driving goods. So this is very good news. The college and individuals wishing to train services employers wishing to upskill workforce should contact logistics at southessex.ac.co.uk. That's logistics at southessex.ac.uk for more information. So that is my good news this week. And let's carry on with the show. But I want to move on now from my good news to the viewpoint. Yes, we are on the viewpoint now. A new segment to the show. And we're going to have a couple of questions this week from the viewpoint. Not one, but 2 viewpoint questions today. The first viewpoint question, or the first opinion that I'm going to give out today, is: should we be vaccinating children against COVID-19? And that's why I've got Zach here today to go through this opinionated segment with me. So, Zach, first question of the viewpoint today: should we be vaccinating children before they go back in September? Yes or no?
My one, yes. I think we should vaccinate children partly because they are a spread of COVID. We give them vaccines for for meningitis, for flu. I don't see a problem for COVID, really, to be fair, Charlie. I think as well, whilst kids are asymptomatic, I know that. Kids are asymptomatic, everything like that, and they're probably very little at risk for severe disease. I also think as well, it's necessary because they are partial spread of the virus. So I think we should vaccinate them.
So that's your view, Zach, on vaccinating children. And this is a good segment now because I'm also going to give my view live on the show. Please, guys, you can agree with me or disagree. We have 2 sides of the argument here. And I'm going to say that children should not be vaccinated. My opinion is this: I understand the benefits of vaccinating children. However, though, I still think there should be more tests on vaccines. I know Pfizer have said already that their vaccine is actually effective in children. However, though, if I was a parent of some kids, I wouldn't force my children to take the vaccine because I just don't know what the I don't know what the side effects would be. And I have to say as well, I think it's morally grotesque on kids, especially some kids who, by the way, are very healthy. Like, they're according to a study, children are extremely low risk from getting get confirmed by a study from COVID. Data from the first 12 months showed the pandemic showed under 25s and under 18s who died from COVID. The number of children who died was about 251 that were admitted, and 1 in 50,000 chances of being admitted to ICU. The risks are very low, and I have to say that that research conducts that children are very, very unlikely to get severely unwell from COVID. And I have to say as well that I think in terms of mental health aspects, I don't know how the vaccine's going to work on children. Some could have severe reactions, and we don't want to see children having that. And it really could be depriving their future. So that is my opinion on the first viewpoint. Please comment down below, guys. I'm live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter on the Charlie Tolhurst Show. Please, guys, I really want to get your views on this issue regarding vaccinating children, because this is one that politicians and scientists have been really much debating on as well. So that's my first question on the viewpoint. My second question on the viewpoint today is a very interesting one. And this one is going to be concerning Afghanistan. Now, the government have confirmed in the UK that they are withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. Now, Zach, what's your opinion on this?
I think this is a complicated one. I think, from my side of it, I think if you want to end forever wars, this is it. And I agree with the idea of removing troops from Afghanistan. If they're just there just to sit around and not do anything, then what's the point? I also think as well, the other side, I am concerned as well, Charlie, that you got the Taliban there who took about 75% of strongholds in Afghanistan. And that's extremely concerning. Haven't had an election there for years. Girls' education has stumbled under the Taliban. I think there's a severe risk. Whilst withdrawing troops is maybe necessary, I also think there's a severe risk as well that, there's a brewing of another terrorist group that could happen. And there's no easy win here. You either keep them in, keep them in there forever for no reason, or, you send them home and risk the Taliban breaking agreements. You have the risk of Al Qaeda or ISIS or another terrorist group that come back into life. So, yeah, there is a big, big problem there.
I mean, Zach, for me, I think when you look at wars and that, I think it's going to be interesting. I would love to have sent more troops out to Afghanistan, but I think at the same time there is a threat from ISIS, and I would certainly take ISIS real hard when it comes to this. I mean, ISIS is clearly a terrorist group and I think as well, when you look at this, it's clear that some countries, like obviously America, for example, Joe Biden announced the other day that he is withdrawing troops from Afghanistan as well. And Boris Johnson also announced this the other day in the House of Commons. And it's a very interesting decision. I really think that Afghanistan isn't a big, a country where there's been a lot of wars. We've had the wars in Syria. I think, let's be honest with you, I think Boris has done a sensible thing. And I think pulling his UK troops out of Afghanistan is the right decision. Please, guys, get on. If you want to comment on the viewpoint, please comment down below in the comment section. I'm live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Please, you can always send me a question, and me and Zach can answer it. It's very, very important, guys, that we get the questions forward. Now we're going to move on, Zach, now to the new segment of the show. Press Watch. Now, this segment might be funny to be controversial in many respects, Press Watch, because I want to talk about a couple of things on Press Watch tonight. And the first one is the former US President Donald Trump, who has been down to the US border wall in Texas, the US-Mexico border, and he has been inspecting the wall. And the other day, Zach, he slammed Joe Biden over the border crisis. What do you make of the former president's comments?
Well, he's going around like he's in charge again for some reason. Why is that, I wonder? But yeah, he's obviously trying to send what they call red meat to the base, saying that Biden's incompetent and, you know, he let all these illegal aliens come in and stuff like that. I won't call them illegal aliens, they're immigrants or asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them. I won't call them aliens because I think it's offensive. But yeah, he went to the border with the Texas GOP governor, Greg Abbott. Yeah, they just expected the border, really. And that's what they did. So, yeah, and then obviously later that evening, Trump had an interview with his favourite Kiss the Ring interviewer, Sean Hannity. I will just call it a Kiss the Ring because it really is what it is, really, a Kiss the Ring interview on Fox News. Yeah, and that's what it was about. He's also speaking at CPAC tomorrow as well, so, and he's had a rally in Florida, so he hasn't quite disappeared, as some people might want him to. But nevertheless, he's obviously, the base, he's trying to keep the base happy, and he's doing that quite well as always.
I didn't even know, Zach, there was another CPAC rally tomorrow. I thought there was one in January, but another CPAC rally.
Yeah, there's another CPAC. It's another CPAC event going on this weekend. I think it's a bit bizarre they do 2 in a year. It's going to be the same talking points over and over again, so I don't see what the difference is between this one and the last one, really, to be fair.
Yeah, certainly interesting indeed. So I'm actually going to play for you a clip of what Trump had to say when he visited the border wall in Mexico. Have a listen to this video here when Donald Trump spoke about the border wall, which is unfinished, in Mexico. This was the president's remarks, and I'm playing now a report from a channel in America. Have a listen to this.
President Trump will be heading to the southern border.
This trip comes just a week after Vice President Kamala Harris went to El Paso. Our Kathy Hernandez is live outside the Mexican consulate this morning to tell us what's expected today at the border. Kathy?
Good morning. Many people will be watching this visit. Governor Greg Abbott and former President Donald Trump will have a media briefing in Weslaco at 11:30 this morning before a tour of the border wall at 12:30. It's an effort to shine a spotlight on the crisis along the Texas-Mexico border. Governor Greg Abbott and former President Donald Trump will tour a portion of the unfinished wall today. In a statement, Trump said it's an unmitigated disaster zone. This comes 2 weeks after the governor announced the state will build its own border wall, funded by taxpayer money and private donations.
Texas is stepping up to get the job done.
On Monday, Abbott tweeted this video saying, quote, building the border barrier has begun. The first step is to get easements on land. The second step is to clear the land for the building process. That is what is happening here. The Texas Facilities Commission is working to hire a program manager to oversee the entire process. It's unclear where the video was taken. The border is facing an increase in illegal crossings, which began at the beginning of 2021. Data shows Border Patrol agents have had more than 100,000 encounters with migrants every month since February.
No one believes that the illegal immigration stops as soon as they cross the river. They know they come north.
This week, Galveston and Montgomery County signed disaster declarations to send resources south to help with the border crisis. Galveston County Judge Mark Henry says he'll use federal COVID funds for his law enforcement to travel there and also pledge up to $6 million to help pay for a border wall.
So that was, Donald Trump there, or Greg Abbott, talking about the border wall in Texas. And Zach, what did you make of the Texas governor's comments on the border, on himself building his own border wall?
Yeah, there's much, you know, Charlie, much money that they could spend on things, and yet they waste it on the border wall. That's just my personal opinion. Waste it on better things. I don't know why they're still going this when the federal government has just dropped funding for the border wall, because I don't think it's necessary. It's just another bit of red meat. It's not really serious, I don't think, Charlie. Yeah, it's just the GOP being the GOP as always. And if that's the way to win elections, presumably, then then yeah, that's what they're going to do.
It's an interesting one, Zach, I have to say. But I think at the end of the day, the border wall was originally, obviously, Trump, when he was in office, did commit to finishing this wall off. Obviously, with Biden now in charge, it seems like Greg Abbott really wants to step up Texas's completion of the border wall, as he's concerned about immigration potentially rising to record levels in the US. Obviously, over here as well in the UK, big immigration, migrant crisis happening here. So it's clear that the United States are talking about this. And Zach, Joe Biden has apparently been questioned by some people over the media's stance on him as well. Some people have said the media tend to be very soft on Biden. What have you made of Biden so far as being president?
Well, I'm going to think very positive on him. Done a decent job so far. On the media being soft on him, I don't agree with that. He's been challenged several times by the media. Sometimes you could say he overreacted to some questions. But honestly, they're not going soft on him. It's rubbish. This is what you hear in conservative earpiece land. I think they're not going soft on him. He's been challenged quite a bit. His job as a president, I'm going to think on the more positive end. I think he's done a good job with COVID. He's got infrastructure deal, hopefully going through Congress, and he's got that deal, a bipartisan infrastructure deal, which is really big for jobs. The economy is rebounding. Jobs are rebounding. So it's going in the right direction, actually. And he's obviously in a fight over voter rights, which he hasn't won yet. But, he seems to have a united Democratic Party on board most of the time, even if they are a little bit split. And it couldn't really be going any better for them, I think. I think they're doing quite well.
It's interesting, Zach. I mean, it is an interesting one. Joe Biden certainly seems to be doing well as president at the moment. I mean, I can't give my view on this, but let me know, guys, down below, what do you make of Joe Biden's first term as president, or first 6 months as president, should I say? Please comment down below. I'd love to hear your answers on this issue. But that was the first thing I wanted to discuss on Press Watch. The second thing I wanted to discuss on Press Watch tonight is something that seems to be really irritating me and many other people. Now, this whole point about Press Watch is bringing you news to try and give the media a bit of attention. And Zach, the UK is certainly in a position with Australia now. Now, I wanted to bring Australia, Zach, onto this Press Watch segment because many areas of Australia are in lockdown, and I have been very critical of Australia's lockdowns over the last few days, and especially in New South Wales, where restrictions have been reimposed again. What do you make of the Australian coverage of COVID at the moment?
Well, it's interesting. As you said, New South Wales, there's been a little bit of a spike, actually. If we look at total cases in Australia, over the last yesterday, I think they reported about 44 cases, which is certainly a much higher peak than they were before. I mean, it got to about, in August, about 411 at one point. But there's certainly a slight increase, not a huge one, but there's certainly been an increase. It's 44 and a 7-day average is 37. But nevertheless, Charlie, New South Wales obviously had a few problems with the cases. But nevertheless, you have the likes of, they have their own version of Sky News Australia. It's basically the Fox News of Australia. And you have this presenter going around, I believe, as well, that is very critical of lockdowns, very critical of shutting down and, that sort of thing. They don't have really much restrictions in Australia in some areas. I know they have lockdown in New South Wales in some areas, but in other areas, it's no restrictions. The one area that they seem to be struggling on, Charlie, is the vaccines. They're very slow. But nevertheless, the Australian press coverage has been a bit mixed on COVID. They've criticised the Herald Sun, which is obviously Rupert Murdoch owned, for misleading comments. It's been a bit mixed there. And yeah, let's look at this. There's hospitals. There definitely has been some failures in some areas as well. In the Australian media to cover COVID correctly.
50 new cases for New South Wales in the last 24 hours.
That's quite something, yeah. That's quite something. But yeah, there's certainly been some criticism, Charlie, of how media's covered this, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
79% of people in hospital in New South Wales or have been admitted unvaccinated. So yes, I mean, Zach, the reason I wanted to chat about Australia is because I feel like they're going for a zero COVID policy. I remember the Premier for New South Wales the other day, Gladys Berejiklian, said that she wanted to run this thing out rather than learning to live with the virus. I find that quite bizarre, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Australia are more, you know, the lockdown approach than, you know, live with COVID approach. You know, if there's several cases in Australia, for example, they could lock down for 7 days or something. You have restrictions and everything put on. So it's an interesting approach. It's worked in New Zealand, not necessarily so far in Australia.
I mean, Zach, this zero COVID approach is something that I find horrendous. I find the zero COVID approach is impossible, given what many media outlets have said over here. It's impossible. It's going to have a lot of hardships. And if you think about it in New South Wales, I mean, it's impossible. I don't understand how they're going to run this Delta variant of COVID, outrun it completely down to zero. Because if you think about it, that variant is more transmissible.
Yeah, absolutely. And those who are like unvaccinated, Charlie, they all, you know, they're the ones that spread COVID around. And, you know, that's where we're seeing these variants come from, like the Delta variant. We've seen it going to unvaccinated people quite prominently. And that's where all these cases are increasing at the moment. So, yeah, it's the role of the media basically to inform the public about COVID. Some people still want to take out the vaccine. That's fine. But if you get a case and you're responsible for variant, then, yeah, that's your problem.
Yeah. So that's your opinion. That's the latest news on Press Watch. But we're going to do a bonus segment as we still have a bit of time left. And the final segment of the show, Zach, is going to be about GB News. Because I've been watching them over the last few days. And there's been a lot of talk, Zach, on GB News about presenting lineups. Lots of changes to presenting lineups with Colin Brazier moving to cover Andrew Neil's show. And Zach, what do you make of Colin Brazier's stint on Andrew Neil's show?
He seems all right so far, I think. I've always thought, you know, Andrew Neil was all right on the 8 to 9 slot until he decided to go away for holiday on 2 weeks. 2 weeks into his stint. That's what I meant. But nevertheless, I think it's interesting, nevertheless, that, you know, Colin Brazier's doing all right, actually. I think, you know, whoever you put him has done all right so far. Apart from the fact that Colin did the misleading viewpoint. I think one of those shows, right, and I think he introduced something completely wrong. I can't remember what it was, but he does it right on that slot. And then you had the likes of, because Colin's been off his normal slot of 9 to 12, you had the likes of Alistair Stewart, Guto Harry, Tom Harwood covering several covers who do all right alongside Mercy Rahuki or something like what her name is.
Yeah, that's the name, Mercy Rahuki. Yeah.
But yeah, that's you know, they seem to have decent covers.
I mean, Zach, I was just going to come on to what shows do you like on GB News and what shows don't you like? Because there's clearly a lot of shows that divide opinion for some of the listeners.
So the shows that I like, Charlie, are obviously, for me, Liam's Glory to Heroes ones, the Simon McCoy and Alex Phillip partnership, and there's obviously Andrew Neil show when he does it. Colin's been decent in that slot. I am the one I think the worst is obviously Tonight Live Dan Wootton.
Yeah, that one always gets controversy. That's actually my favourite show, believe it or not.
Oh, of course it would be, Charlie, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's not my cup of tea. I'm not a fan of shouting man shouting, stuff that completely ludicrous and comes across as a ranting old man on television, really, and not very impartial when presenting things.
I have to say, Zach, there's more shows like at the weekend as well. Well, what's your views on the weekend coverage of the GB News?
The one that I obviously like is Alistair Stewart, who's an all-round excellent presenter. Whether you can agree or disagree, he does it so fairly, and he's a joy to watch as always. The one I'm not too keen of, obviously, is Neil Lover is right. I think he's better suited to coast than he is news presenting. The political correction I don't like because it's not very balanced at all.
You're Nigel Farage on that one, and a Conservative MP.
Yeah, why would you? Not very balanced. You have two right wingers presenting with a token lefty. Really, it's not very balanced at all.
And yeah, and Zach as well. You've also got a show called Free Speech Nation, which is presented by Andrew Doyle, who is a comedian. It's a show that I think for many people, defining the word woke, and it's more of an English lesson, if I'm honest with you. But it's actually quite useful, I think.
Yeah, it's more of a culture wars show than anything else. Obviously, trying to get a more comedian-like look at the week's news, which I don't mind, to be fair. I don't mind a comical view. It's different. Even if I don't agree with the presenter, I suppose I like it because it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Zach. Whilst I'm here, I'm actually going to play for you some GB News coverage whilst we're here, because this is some coverage from GB News is what we always want. We always want to... I feel like we see GB News on our screens, and it's something that is very, very interesting indeed. And one of the videos I wanted to play from GB News is what Tom Harwood had to say the other day about restrictions on COVID-19. Have a listen to what this GB News reporter had to say. Tom Harwood on COVID-19 restrictions. Have a listen to this.
Path to freedom. That's how Boris Johnson likes to describe his roadmap, culminating with a long-awaited Freedom Day on July the 19th. Personally, I'm going to be delighted when we're able to cry freedom, thanks to our vaccine success. I'm booking nightclub tickets. But a new poll by Ipsos Mori shows a terrifying proportion of Brits think very differently. In the survey carried out for The Economist magazine, the polling company found scary levels of public support for keeping restrictions on our lives in perpetuity. They found that 19% wanted nighttime curfews to continue forever. 26% wanted casinos and clubs closed forever. 35% wanted a quarantine for all those coming into the country forever. And 40% wanted people to wear masks in shops and on transport forever. Well, Matthew Holhouse, who wrote up this story for The Economist, came to a concerning conclusion. He wrote, 50 years ago, half of Europe was under governments that from time to time imposed such measures. They survived in part through repression, but also some consent. Are the British people, by character, really so different? And it got me thinking that looking at the world in 1940, the whole of Europe, from Portugal to Japan, was under one form or other of authoritarian government. The whole of that Eurasian landmass under authoritarianism. Britain alone stood free. And I thought up until now that there's something intrinsic in the British character that pushed away that sort of fascism and communism, that pushed away that sort of authoritarianism. But potentially now, were we so insulated from that after all? Potentially not. I'm thinking that maybe we came really quite close back then to authoritarianism. Perhaps our mindset is not particularly different. And that entire survey, this idea that a huge proportion of Brits want to curtail our liberties in perpetuity beyond the pandemic, really upsets some of those assumptions about liberty-loving Britain. I don't know, Mercy, what do you think about that?
Well, what can I say about all of that? I mean, I was shocked when I saw these. I just thought, forever? I mean, even after COVID, and some people have been saying, people who have been lockdown skeptics, so to say, people have been saying there are people who actually want lockdown to continue forever, and that's been batted away. No, of course not. There's nobody who wants to lockdown to continue forever. No sane person would want masks to continue forever. These people just want, you know, the restrictions to continue until a sensible time. But this is saying otherwise, isn't it? This is saying that there are genuinely huge chunks of people who want them to continue.
Throughout this pandemic, I've been very critical of people who claim that lockdowns don't work, that somehow that somehow reducing social interaction between people doesn't reduce virus spread. Of course it does. It literally does. How does putting one person, isolating them from someone else, not reduce virus spread? It does. The people that say that lockdown don't work are just denying that reality. But equally bonkers, potentially more bonkers, are the people who say that restrictions should continue on our lives in perpetuity. I'm sorry to be frustratingly centrist here, but potentially restrictions were necessary during the pandemic. The idea that these restrictions should go on beyond the pandemic is terrifying, and we need to be calling out these nutty, anti-liberty, anti-reality people just as heavily as anti-vaxxers are called out.
Thanks to Tom Harwood there for your opinion on the pandemic restrictions. Zach, what did you make of his viewpoint there on the?
Do you know what, Charlie? I think he has a point there. I agree with him. I actually agree with him. You know, the lockdown was necessary to reduce the spread of COVID. There's no doubt about it. And if you reduce contact, you're less likely to infect people, obviously. As long as you can manage it, obviously, because that's the thing. I don't think the answer should be locking down forever, because I think that's just too cruel. There are sectors of businesses out there that are going to die if you lock down forever. And the time when we get to use seeing loved ones, there's no good seeing over a computer screen and texting like this. You know, it's not good doing that. But there's something joy missing in not seeing people in person. And if the idea that you want to lock things down or close things down is pathetic. You know, there's some point it's going to be something where we're going to be cases going to be low enough, vaccination will be so high enough that there's no point of lockdown anymore. You know, I think that's pathetic. I think the idea that there's a certain amount that want to keep lockdowns forever is pathetic. It's not the way that you should be doing things. That's just terrible. And I agree with him partly on that one. I think lockdowns worked. I don't think they work forever. And now we're getting to that stage where, you know, they're not going to bother with lockdowns, fair enough. But, you know, the idea that we will be locked down forever and trapped in forever, reduce every social contact forever, it's a little bit worrying. I don't mind lockdowns when necessary, but lockdowns for the sake of lockdown, nah.
I mean, Zach, you've got to say the pro-lockdown media and some doomsday scientists. I want to make this point here, Zach. Okay, now if you watch Good Morning Britain and you see Dr. Hillary on air, every time I hear him, it's doom and gloom from Dr. Hillary. It's like we're going to have massive outbreaks. Oh, we're going to keep these restrictions in place. And he was at Wimbledon the other day without a mask on. I'm like. You kind of get a point there. Yeah, it's just a bit crazy. And then I see, another scientist, I forgot his name, a member of SAGE. By the way, you know my views on the SAGE committee there as well. But I mean, Zach, I feel like a lot of these scientists that seem to want restrictions to be like continuing, I feel like some of these scientists are becoming a bit complacent on themselves. What would your view be on this?
As long as they do their job and advise correctly, then it's up to whatever personal views they personally have. It's up to them. Just don't show it when you're in the public in the job. That's how I see it. I think SAGE has been invaluable to deciding how restrictions are going, how their advice and scientific views are. I think they've been invaluable. They've been important. Now, as I said, don't be a hypocrite because you've got Hilary Jones, and I think he's a good doctor. I just don't want him to do hypocritical things like, stuff like that, going to Wimbledon without a mask. I mean, he might be doing it within the trial runs and regulations, fair enough. But then to say something, in normal, don't put your mask on and stuff like that, make sure you put mask on, it does seem a little bit silly, I must admit.
I mean, Zach as well, yeah, I have to say before I wrap this up, the last thing, Richard Madeley was used to actually present Good Morning Britain. He sometimes appears as a guest presenter in place of Piers Morgan. I heard he had an interview the other day with, I think, Susan Michelle, who was a SAGE scientist, and literally started challenging her own political background. I thought this was quite interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, because this Susan woman is apparently revealed to have communist views, basically. Now, as I said, that's fine if it's not getting away with the job. So it's obviously there's a sort of concern that if you associate communism and stuff like that, they're very authoritarian in communism. So in stuff like China, stuff like that, they're very authoritarian. They're very censorship and everything like that, and that's too far. I know it's when you start talking about lockdowns and everything like that, whether we should impose restrictions. When shit comes out of her mouth, it's there's always going to get people's mind going, and that should not be conflict between her views, personal political views. That's understandable. Everyone has it, even when they're doing an important job. But nevertheless, let's have another scientist come out with that rather than her, I think, Zach, as well, like, just before I wrap this up, Richard Madeley he's an anti-lockdowner, unfortunately, for Good Morning Britain. It's quite obvious.
Being on a show where it's like, there are a lot of it's pro-lockdown people like Susanna Reid and Dr. Hilary Jones. I kind of have to say that Richard Madeley has been very outspoken about lockdown. He, in Talk Radio once, he said he criticised the government for playing hide and seek with a virus. I mean, it comes to a point, Zach, where I actually sort of agree with what he said, because if you think about it, Richard Madeley had to speak out about this, and I really think it's important that he shares his views on issues regarding COVID. And I have seen he has clashed with Hillary a couple of times on the coronavirus himself.
Absolutely. He obviously has differed the views and that, and obviously, but there's nothing wrong with him expressing an opinion, really, to be fair. Piers Morgan was very opinionated. I don't think there's nothing wrong with Richard Madeley doing the same, even if he disagrees. So, yeah. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Partridge sometimes, Richard Madeley, but I mean, he's a decent presenter overall, even if I don't agree with everything he says.
Yeah, Richard Madeley's certainly a presenter that's controversial in his own right, but it's like Dan Wootton as well on his anti-lockdown monologue on Tonight Live on GB News. I heard him the other day slamming a SAGE scientist, but there you go. That certainly got immediate attention there. But that's it for the Charlie Tolhurst show tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back next Sunday for the Charlie Tolhurst show. But I've got one more message before we go. Let's hope football is coming home tomorrow, 8 p.m.
Come on, England.
The big match. And Zach, before I finish, what's your prediction for the final tomorrow?
I'll be optimistic and say England win in that extra time, like they did in Denmark.
Going for extra time.
2-1. Yeah.
2-1. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win England to
here.
win in extra. England to win in extra time too.
Well, I can say 1-0 in extra time. I think it'll be 0-0 after full time, and I say 1-0 after extra time for England.
Change the prediction for that. Let's see how it gets on. But that's it for the Charlie Tolhurst show. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next week for another show. Take care. Goodbye.